Hello and welcome to the May webinar for APQC. This is a combined webinar for both our process and knowledge management audiences. And we're going to be discussing highlights from our APQC conference that just took place a couple of weeks ago in Houston, Texas. So today we are joined by Jeff Varney, who's the director of our advisory services team, myself, the research lead for knowledge management, and my wonderful partner here, who's the research lead for process management, Madison Lundquist. Today, we're going to do a little bit of a conference refresher, talk a little bit about the theme that we had at the conference this year and what some people experienced, some of the conversations, some of the insights. And we're really excited to have both audiences with us, hopefully today in this webinar. So hopefully there's some of you here who attended the conference. Please provide your insights and comments and any of your learnings that you might have experienced. Use that chat function and share with others. But also we're excited to have those of you who couldn't attend the conference for various reasons, just to give you a little bit of insight about what it's like to experience when we come together in Houston and some of those really key hot topics and takeaways that we focused on this year. We found that to be in kind of three areas: KM and process partnership, which is always really a big part of our conference, but also, as you can imagine, a lot on artificial intelligence this year, and also transformation and change. And then, as always, at the end of this webinar, because you are here or signed up, you will receive a link with the materials that we're sharing today, including the recording. And then in about a month or so, we'll also have a summary write-up that will include a lot of the dialogue and the conversations and the transcript from today's meeting that will give a little bit more meat in case you weren't able to actually join today. So jumping right in, as you can see, we tried to share a few pictures of, give you a feel for what it might have been like to be at the conference this year. You can see those trees sitting up on the stage area. And we had people filling out little paper leaves throughout the conference with their insights and placing them on the trees around our conference themes. And I believe we collected around 450 different insights, learnings, ideas, things people wanted to share throughout. So eventually we will capture all of that information as well and use that to share. We had a great deal of fun. Myself and my co-host, Jonathan Kraft, who leads our Open Standards benchmarking team, was there to shepherd everyone through the 2 days. We also had 2 days prior to the conference where we had conference workshops, pre-conference workshops, and taught in a multitude of different topics: KM and process, metrics and analytics, managing change. And we had a great deal of fun with a lot of the members and non-members who were able to join us for that as well. Now, I'm going to share with you just a little bit of the demographics, so it'll give you a little bit of an idea of what it might have felt like to be there. We have a good mix of people. We had 75% of members who attended, members of APQC, but we also had 25% who were non-members. So it was a great time to meet new people, meet up with old friends, but also meet new people. We had 44 of the 50 states in the US actually represented, and we had 20% international attendees. So you can imagine the conversations, just a great opportunity to learn from different experiences and cultures as well. We had 2 companies that had to travel almost 10,000 miles to get there. So they came from Kuala Lumpur, which was a long way. So just thought we'd share a little bit of that. We also had, we asked the question around the years of experience when people come, because you want to see that there's a breadth of knowledge from people starting out programs for KM and process, but also those who have been doing it for a really long time. And I think we had a great mix of people with like 28% who were in the early stages, but we had 38% of people with 10 or more, and then we had everything in between. So just a great opportunity, again, for all different levels of learning and ideas to share with everybody. Here's a look at our industries that were present. And we had a heavy representation from government, military, oil and gas, financial services. And you can see lots of other industries that were represented, from nonprofit to insurance to engineering, medical equipment, software. So it's just, again, a great opportunity to get some great diversity of thought. We're all trying to solve a lot of the same problems. So it's really great to meet with those from other industries. The theme this year that we had for our conference was Connect, Change, and Grow. And what we did at the beginning of our conference was to really ask people to think about connection, right? Introduce yourself to other people that you don't know, reconnect with those people you've met in past conferences or maybe previous colleagues or things like that, and take the opportunity to find other people that you can connect with, even maybe outside of the conference once you leave. So we take great pride in really trying to build those connections, not just with APQC, but among each other as you attend the conference. But the big thing is to really find your sense of belonging, because what we find in our conferences is that process and KM people, we're very like-minded. We like to get together. We like to solve those problems together. We're very collaborative. So it's a great opportunity to just really build those connections. With change, we hear so much about so much change happening in the workforce and all around us today in transformation. So we decided to focus on change as well. And you hear more about that as we go forward. But this concept is really about just be bold, be curious, be interested enough to ask the right questions, so that you can help your organization really drive through change and help manage that change in a more effective way. We talked a lot about different techniques and ways of managing change. So again, you'll hear a little bit more about that as we go through. And then our final theme was around grow. At a conference, we really want you to learn. We want you to think about ways to grow personally, professionally, look for those challenges and those opportunities that each of the speakers and your connections help you make, and take those back with you, emulate their successes, learn from their failures when they're willing to share that, and just really challenge yourself. So overall, it was really about trying to seek people that you can learn from and ask tough questions so you can improve yourself and you can help others improve as they go forward. So that was a little bit about how we started out. We also said to all of the people in the who were attending on day one right away, and this is a picture from the stage, the big screen on the stage, where we asked the question and said, what does it mean to you? Right? What does the theme Connect, Change, Grow mean to you? Is there any one word that sticks out? Is there a reason that you came? And this Wordle represents what people were really thinking about when they came to the conference. So the bigger the word, the more often it was mentioned. So it was a lot about people figuring out how to help their companies transform and evolve to a new future state, how to collaborate and learn, how to become more innovative, community focus, all of that. So really great opportunity. I think these words, as I was watching them pop up on the screen during the conference, I thought, wow, I didn't even think of that word, right? So I love this. I loved willingness. That one really stood out to me too. The willingness to be open-minded and just learn new things while you're here. So that's just a little bit about that. Now I'm going to show you something. I kind of like this. If you all know what social network analysis is where you have kind of it's a capability where you build nodes, and the central node represents kind of that one place where everyone goes for information. A lot of times we do this with humans to establish who's that center person that everybody goes to, who's the person we go to get questions answered and things like that. Well, we built a social network analysis for what it felt like at the conference, and I thought this was a great picture to just show you that when we all come together in the very, very large room when we kick off the conference, and then throughout different times of the conference, we have what we call general sessions, where we have a keynote speaker or we have an overarching topic that we really want everyone in the conference to be aware of. So we gathered around and we had topics such as learning improvisation skills to help us have better conversations, how to build better connections and to manage change. We learned how to be fluxy, which is really another word for having a change mindset, from one of our keynotes. And we learned from a person who's a published poet how to be a little bit more creative in how we think about managing transformation and growing our own capabilities as well. So those were a lot of fun things that we did together. Then we had our breakout sessions were broke up into these 5 categories, where we have processes for KM and capabilities for both KM and process. We had a technology track. We had a collaboration and change transformation track. So we had all of those areas covered. And within that, that's where we had our speakers, our people who are members or non-members, come to APQC and say, hey, we want to share our story. And this is where you get to hear from their learnings. And these were some of the topics that we talked about. Everything from frameworks, and accelerators and metrics to platforms and tools and customer experience to new skill sets and governance that need to be developed. The other thing we had was what we call extracurricular activities. And these are the places where you can connect with people not in a formal setting. So we had built-in networking breaks where you could go around and talk to someone that you met in a session or someone that you heard speak. We also had a couple of sponsors. We have one process and one KM sponsor for the conference. And we had booths set up so you could go learn from them about their products and how they're helping in both of those areas of expertise. We had a networking reception. We had brain break areas where people could go and play fun games and talk to each other, and a photo booth, one of my personal favorites, where you have pictures taken with your old and new friends. And we had obviously meals where we connected. We had one new thing this year that I thought was really wonderful, and it was called APQC Connect. This was a room that we had set aside where people could, you know, if you wanted to have a meeting with somebody in a more comfortable place, if you wanted to learn about APQC, if you wanted to go see a brief little overview of some of the research areas that we're focusing on, and it was really comfy with couches and just one of those really comfortable kind of a coffee shop-like environment. So we tried to provide plenty of opportunities where people could connect and learn. And what this does, when you see these lines, this is about how we make connections at this conference, right? These are all the different ways you could do it. You could pick and choose how you wanted to do this. Some things might have been more valuable to one person than another, but this was just a great way for us to show you this is what the experience was like. And then we had a quote. We just wanted to share one quote from one of our members. And this one has a little bit of a backstory. This person, Rachel Carroll from the US Navy, started out with engaging with APQC as taking process training. And now her role has shifted a little bit, and she's having to figure out how to start a knowledge management program within her organization. So she wanted to be at the conference to figure out, what's my path forward look like? How can I learn more about the knowledge management side? So she told us that the conference was awesome and that she made great connections that changed her perspective, and she felt like she grew exponentially from being a part of it all. So this is just a really great example of, I think, how a lot of people feel, and this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to connect you all to each other so that you can continue to build connections outside of the conference experience and other experiences as well. Somebody in the chat, it looks like they're asking about the location. The location of our conference is always, I'll use the word always because it hasn't changed in several years, but located in Houston, Texas, which is where the headquarters for APQC is. Okay, I'm going to pass it off now. We're going to talk about our first kind of hot topic area that we spend a lot of time at the conference, and I'm going to let Jeff and Maddie jump in on this.
Outstanding. Thanks, Lynda. So, by the way, Rachel is online with us today, the previous quote. So, cool. Rachel, if you want to jump in and add something at some point, by all means, please do.
Welcome, Rachel.
The KM and process partnership, it's really an interesting kind of focus that we've had. And so I'm going to talk a few minutes about this, and then we'll look a little bit more specific. But early on at the start of the conference, Cindy Hubert and myself, Cindy in the lower right-hand picture here, we focused on connect, and we really wanted to talk about the connection primarily. So this connection between knowledge management and process management, and the skills and needs, and how we both enable the business to improve and drive towards future strategies and outcomes. So that common kind of foundation is there already, but how do we actually connect? How do we avoid working kind of in our own little silo, focusing on our disciplines and approaches, and how can we get that kind of accelerator or force multiplier by working together where we can? So that was the focus of this early section. And in doing so, Cindy and I introduced the concept of the knowing doing phenomenon. The knowing doing phenomenon. So if we talk about what is a phenomenon, it's something that's unusual, exceptional, it stands out. A phenomenon can be something like a natural disaster. In Houston just recently, we've had some very severe storms, unusual, and it connects people. It forces people to step outside of their everyday avenues and thought processes and say, we're part of something bigger, and how do we connect to our neighbors in a different way to everybody work through this particular issue, et cetera. But there's also the phenomenon of that are more positive in nature. It could be a sporting event. The Super Bowl is a phenomenon. It's not just like every other football game, or the World Cup. It's not like just every other game that happens throughout the different leagues and seasons, but it really brings together people that wouldn't naturally show up and engage in ways that give us now, through the phenomenon, an opportunity to connect and expand, to change, grow, and connect in new ways. So the knowing doing phenomenon is really about the what do we know, right? How do we connect that to what we do? What do we need to know, and how do we connect that to what we need to do? And if we can now start to think about bringing our audiences together to, again, get that force multiplier, connecting knowing and doing, and the disciplines behind that to enable our organizations to be more focused and improve at a greater rate, with it having that stickiness and staying power, as opposed to a lot of initiatives and random acts of change that might be going on. But now collective change and growth is really what we were focused on. And the first step of that is to create the partnership, create the connections there. So in doing so, we gave a little bit of background, the fact that we've really been trying to bring these audiences together for well over a decade through offering process training to the knowledge audiences at our former knowledge conferences, and offering knowledge training to the process audiences, right? How do you enable and supercharge the workflows through better flow of the knowledge that's necessary to get the work done correctly at the level of quality, et cetera. But through the serendipity of the global pandemic, which was a phenomenon, we found that we brought our two conferences together. And now we feel like bringing everybody together for the 2 days of the conference was a phenomenon in and of itself. The knowing, doing phenomenon, and really learning together, changing together, growing together is really what it all came down to. So there's so many ways that we can leverage each other and work together. And part of our message to the audience was leverage what Lynda showed, all those opportunities to connect throughout the conference, whether it was through the keynotes, whether it was through the breakout presentations, or the APQC Connect room and the networking events. You've got the opportunity to connect and leverage that now towards your growth, but also helping others change and grow. Very, very powerful. And that's really what we want to engender through the conference experience and the materials we captured from it. So we're going to delve into that a little bit more here. If you want to move forward to the next slide, and I think Maddie, you'll jump in.
Yes, thanks, Jeff. So Lynda and I talked from the main stage, and we used a little bit of metaphor, if you will, to compare both KM and process professionals to a popular movie, or characters from a popular movie, Toy Story. So that's why you see these clouds in the background, and then you've got a friend in me tagline there. And we talked a lot about the KM and PPM partnership that exists. And for the KM folks, we say that they're a lot like Woody. They can be that emotional core of the group, an influencer and leader, and they can help remind the team about their purpose and keep them united. And then on the other hand, we compared process experts more like the character Buzz. We said that they're more the strategists, those tactical masterminds that keep the group focused, and they have that organizational and management skills to act as a leader and influencer as well. And much like in the movie, Woody and Buzz end up working together for the greater good, and they have that you've got a friend in me mindset. So that's kind of a little background there. During our session, we had 3 key things that tied to the theme of the conference as well. We had them in a little different order though, but we had connect, grow, and change. So in connect, we talked a lot about aligning those business priorities, the strategies, and your organizational plans, connecting between not just KM and PPM groups, but the organization overall. And we also talked about developing those necessary skills to set your organization up for success, whether that's foundational knowledge or knowledge needed for the future. And then when we looked at grow, we talked about improving your KM and process programs so that they continue to add value to the organization and are seen as necessary, not a nice to have. Remember that new tools and technology are all around us, but you've got to understand how your organization can benefit from them, and don't just jump into anything without that solid foundation of process and KM knowledge first. And I did want to note that when we were in the pre-conference training, so we have a couple days of training that happened before the conference, I saw a lot of crossover between PPM and KM folks, which I thought was really cool. There were process folks attending the knowledge courses, and then there were KM folks attending the process courses, just to cross-train on the other disciplines, which was really, really neat. And last but not least, we talked about change. So the pace of change in the business is constant, but we really drove home that you need to be sure you're effectively managing and navigating your organization through those changes. So that's, yep, thank you, Lynda. So then I know Lynda alluded to the fact that we talked about improv for a little bit, and you may say, how in the world does improv relate to business? But in fact, there's a lot of similarities. And this was a session that was super hands-on. It was a general session, so everybody was in one room, and they actually had different activities where they practiced different improv scenarios. And it is a misconception that improv is just making stuff up on the spot. It's actually about having that right tool or the tools in your toolbox to approach any situation. And here are 4 key tools that we learned about in the improv session. First was that yes and concept. So think about responding to conversations with yes and versus just that yes or no. And you can also try the response yes, but. So for this one, people were in pairs and they were given different scenarios and they had to respond to everything their partner said with yes and or yes, but. And I was listening to people throughout the room, and they were like, it was actually really hard for me to be like, yes, but to everything. So just practice this every once in a while and use those phrases when you feel it works best. The second one was give gifts. And when in relation to improv, the keynote speaker was talking about how you can give people gifts in an improv situation that allows the conversation to keep going, or allows the scene to keep going, and it doesn't just stop right away. And so when you're looking at this from a business perspective, you have the ability to give your colleagues gifts that help that work to continue instead of having them hit a roadblock. So make sure as you're working with your colleagues and other departments in the organization, how can you give them gifts to ensure that their work continues and doesn't just stop abruptly? Then we talked about listening, and here we were talking about actually listening. So a lot of times when people listen, we're thinking about what we're going to say next. But in improv, we learned that if you aren't actually listening, you're going to misinterpret the scene or end it altogether with your next response. And that same concept is true in business. You need to actually listen before you develop your responses. And remember that it's okay to be quiet for a little bit to think and formulate that response. And last but not least, we talked about using mistakes. Of course, mistakes are going to happen. And when they do, use them to your advantage. In improv, mistakes can be funny and take a scene in a cool new direction. And in business, they're bound to happen. And it's how you react and use them to improve that actually matters. And I think with that, I'm going to pass it off to Jeff.
Excellent, thanks. And so one of the things that Maddie talked about earlier was this concept of not just connecting KM and process, but there are many other people and groups within our organizations that are also trying to help to drive change and grow, to improve, to find solutions to challenges or solutions to things that are new that need to be accomplished. So when we look at that, I can go back to an experience, over a decade ago, and we went into an organization and I identified 16 different groups all trying to change the organization. But the conflict was they were all doing it individually rather than working together. And it creates change, clutter, and confusion amongst those they're trying to fix and help. And so this example here from Shumash was presented in one of the breakout sessions, and it showed how they've taken some of these insights and started to say, what are the different tools and technologies, methodologies that may exist that we can connect together, whether they're blended together within the knowledge toolkit or the process toolkit or across different groups and teams. But the key is recognize that the toolkit is much broader than just process management techniques, Lean, Six Sigma, process mapping, et cetera, or knowledge capture, transfer, knowledge elicitation, communities of practice, et cetera. There are so many tools and many of them actually cross over here. So when you start to look at it in context and say, where do I have the skills? Where does my team or the peers I'm working with have the skills? And who else around the organization may have some of these methodologies and tools that we can now blend together to accomplish more faster with less effort? That's a win for all of our organizations, and avoids that kind of random acts of change or random acts of improvement that can get in the way. So the key is to be thinking about excellence overall. Ultimately, the work we do in our organizations is what drives the outcome, and work is through process. But process is enabled by knowledge and technology and the people themselves. And when we bring people, process, knowledge, and technology all together, it's a powerful combination. And we have to kind of move them together also through these different methodologies and disciplines. So Shumas has started to recognize that, and they're putting that power into their focus of not just improving, but creating sustainable change that they can then build upon for what's next. And they're not constantly kind of restarting or going a different direction. So very, very powerful. And again, one of the many, many breakout sessions that illustrated some of these powerful things about the connect, change, and grow, and doing it beyond just our standard kind of what we know, but leveraging what we collectively know. So as we looked at this, one of the things that we talked about was this concept of what we know from a process and knowledge audience here. And as I spoke about this on the main stage, I was really highlighting maybe a shift in thinking, because it caught me by surprise. When we talk about the key focus areas for growing knowledge management skills, change management, design thinking, problem solving, data management, those were the top 5 in our most recent surveys that we've done. On the process side, the skills that they say they need to develop and leverage more are change management, design thinking, analytics, data vision, and storytelling. And what threw me there was the concept of storytelling, for instance. That's been a knowledge management best practice for decades. The power of telling a story and passing on knowledge through that kind of human tradition of oral tradition of storytelling. So powerful. But the fact that the process audience recognizes that that's one of their biggest challenges, communicating what is the process, how do we work together to get the work done, and the critical knowledge necessary to provide the fuel to the engine of the process itself. And so seeing the kind of shift, whereas on the other side for knowledge, the data management and the problem solving skills that are necessary, and so we really share a lot of commonality, and the shifting over time is there. So as we build our skills from our 2 discipline perspectives, we have so much we can leverage from each other, and that overlap is really powerful. How we set up above the flow, making ourselves capable of driving change and improvement to drive the in the flow change. Where we connect, the sweet spot between us is how we connect to drive the improvement for those doing the work out in the business, managing the work in the business, being innovative, and driving the improvement. We can't change them for them. We can help them change themselves and grow and become stronger, faster, better, whatever the outcomes are that are appropriate for their stakeholders. So that concept of bringing our 2 views together, seeing the overlap and the shift in what we need skill-wise, and harnessing that power to helping those that we serve. That's really what this was all about. And we can share that commonality and then use that, as we said before, thinking about even those other audiences and skills, quality people, measurement people, training and development people, change management experts, whatever those disciplines are, like we saw in the Shumas example, let's bring them all together and connect in the flow together to drive those outcomes. So what we want to do at this point is maybe do a quick poll. And so this is something that you can do. The poll should have showed up on your screen here. How well do you and your KM process partner within the organization today? Is it happening? So you've got a few answer options here. Select the one that best fits, single choice in this case, but we'd just like to get a sense for you out there of the audience. And I think we've got well over 130 people out there. How do you see process and KM working today? So take a moment, see if you can go ahead and answer that for us, and we'll bring up some of the results here to see who we are. Lynda, I'm going to put you on the spot here real quick. You know, you've worked, you've only been at APQC for a little over a year now. You know, the organizations you were with before, how well did you see it for those organizations?
It depended on which year you asked me that question, right? So yeah, we worked toward that over time. But at first, when we started KM and when we started our lean journey many, many years ago, they were very kind of separate things. But eventually we saw the connections, and eventually I was managing knowledge people, learning people, Lean and Six Sigma process experts, quality engineers, all together in one team, because it was all about improving, right, how we work together. So it was a pretty cool journey to watch happen. And there's a lot of value when you bring those. It doesn't even need to be organizationally, even just partnering better together works as well. So
absolutely. And again, I think there's lots of goals. The question becomes, how do we make it happen? We'll come back to that a little bit more here. Real quick, I want to do a shout out from the chat. Devraj put out a comment there saying pragmatism is a critical skill for both audiences. And that is absolutely true. I know Lynda and I've had numerous conversations around that. We can't be theorists and academic in how we apply these skills and techniques. We have to be very pragmatic to when and how they can fit the culture and the needs of the organization. So great call out there. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Look at these results, Jeff.
It's a pretty good distribution there, isn't it?
I'm surprised to see 20% part of the same team. I think that's actually a great, I think that's a great thing.
And that's the highest number on here. And that's, I think what I've seen at least is a trend towards recognizing that we need to connect these groups. And when we can put them under the same kind of structure, and again, get that, what I call force multiplier or accelerator, working together. When we are in the same organization, we're more likely to work together towards common shared goals. Very powerful. But you don't have to. It can be federated or distributed, but you still have to go and reach out to each other and find those opportunities to connect and collaborate.
Yeah. We still have a few that are not partnering, or they don't even have one or the other teams, right? No KM team, no process team. So still a lot of work that we can do there, right? And help people get started in those areas when they need to. So
interesting, in the comment thread there, the chat thread, I'm both. That happens quite often, right? I'm a single person is, hey, make this happen for us, right? And that's a challenge. Versus there aren't either, right? Very interesting to see that. So we've come in all shapes and sizes. The key is whether there's a formal structured team or not for process, knowledge, and these other disciplines. Absolutely. Knowledge work and process work is happening, right? And so the question is, how can we now ensure the skills and techniques are to the people that need them? That's first and foremost. And then if we can get these teams formed, we're now, again, able to do more and drive that. So we're not saying you must have a formal structured team and they must be co-located. But the point is, knowledge and process are critical success factors to any improvement and change.
Absolutely. Thank you. We're gonna keep on moving, and we're gonna move to our next kind of key topic area at the conference, as you can imagine, which was AI. And there's so much that we're talking about in this space, and we obviously can't cover everything. So I wanted to mention a few of I'm going to say the things that I heard at the conference, what some of the presentations covered. We had everything from talking about the fact that this needs to be focused. This is not just a technical revolution or a digital transformation. This is a cultural transformation. How we interact with machines. How do we leverage something like artificial intelligence? How do we build trust in our organizations that this is something that's considered positive and not scary because it's taking a job away, or it's taking away something that I think I can do better myself, right? How do you learn how to operate that way? Also, keeping our solutions focused on the business needs, thinking about how organizations are using it today, how they're piloting it, what are they experiencing from a results perspective. We talk a lot about benefits expected, and that's still the space we're in a lot of cases, is the expected benefits. What we really need to get to at that next level is, what are we actually experiencing? What benefits are we actually seeing? Is it all positive? What are the negatives that we're seeing, right? So we're getting to that point now where it's been around, especially generative AI, where we can start looking at those. So lots of those kinds of conversations going on. I want to mention something that one of our sponsors, which was eGain, they were our knowledge management sponsor, and they're a software company that has a knowledge management software, and they're doing a lot around generative AI, as you can imagine. A couple of the comments they made was that AI has awoken the knowledge management beast, which I thought was interesting. They said it made organizations realize that knowledge needs to be managed and content has to be in order for that to happen. They talk about KM being foundational for generative AI, but that AI can also help they said 60 to 80% of KM processes related to explicit knowledge, right around content. And they talked about their 3 keys to success actually being trusted content, having controls in place, and leveraging analytics. So a little bit from our KM sponsor. Maddie, I didn't know if you wanted to mention anything from a process perspective before we jumped into a couple of things, but.
Sure. Much like you talked about the foundation from the process side too, you've got to start with that strong, solid foundation because AI is not just going to fix your bad process. Make sure you're understanding what the business needs and watch out for those shiny new tools without doing your due diligence first. And be sure you train your employees and communicate. That was a big thing that we heard. And consider the change management plan and approach as well. And talking about data and the availability of data with AI and technology, we did some research on KPIs earlier this year, and people used to complain that they couldn't get access to the data, and now they have too much data and they can't trust it. So really making sure that whatever you're going to apply AI or technology to it has that strong foundation of valid data, good processes in place, good knowledge management approach as well.
Absolutely. So that's a little bit kind of about what we heard throughout the conference. And now we're going to share just a couple of things that happened throughout the conference as well.
So one of the things that we did is we talked about the drivers and forces of change because it's all around us, it seems. And so AI being one of those more recent things that has everybody focused, right? I'll come to that in a moment. But there's been so many transformational efforts that are going on, right? You go back 10 or 15 years ago, and there was a digital instrumentation, getting away from analog to digital infrastructure, and what that drove from a change perspective. We have technology change all the time. For instance, an ERP upgrade is a classic, very intrusive activity at an organization, and we often get involved with our members as they're going through that process. And there's many, many different consultants and vendors that get involved. It's very complex. Some of it might be organizational transformation through merger and acquisition or other types of things. They're all drivers of change, and they don't stop. They don't slow down. These are happening around us all the time. Social and global issues. Think about the social with ESG and sustainability and how that became more focused. And we need to now understand how we're dealing with that responsibly with green supply chain and other types of aspects that might change the way and drive us a different direction than where we are today. And it gives us a new future to target. Or global issues like the pandemic that we mentioned before that might change the way we approach our workforce and work from home and other types of drivers that we now have to encompass that we may have not had before. But the pace of change is what seems to always increase. It never really slows down. The different types of change are there. And we have to recognize, how do we manage that pace of change? And back to what we've said before, when we work together through the change, it's easier than when we're trying to all work it independently. So one of the things we have to think about is, regardless of the source here, back to the artificial intelligence, some of it's hype and buzz, and we all get anxious. I think Lynda mentioned that. We can get anxious and we can have fear, and the natural change curve, right, that people go through, eventually, hopefully, to acceptance and adopting and applying the change to greater things than they could have done before. But with AI, that's what we're at. We're at a very formative stage for many of us, especially with generative. And what does it mean? And how is it going to change the future? And what does it mean to my job and to the work I can do and to my customers? So the forces of change are all there still, with now that additional emphasis on generative AI in the mix and where it's going to take us. So being aware of this and not just kind of getting into that single lane and ignoring everything else. Sometimes you have to, put the blinders on and focus, but before you're done, you have to open up to, what are all these drivers, and am I fitting into the right outcome that is the best for ourselves, our stakeholders, and our customers? So that's really what this is about. And I think, why don't we move forward, Lynda, and you may want to jump into a little bit more on AI.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. And that was, like I said, it's hard to break this one down into a small pocket of conversation, right? There's so much going on, but I attended a session, one of the breakout sessions during the conference that was put on by Google, one of our members, and I thought they did a great job of talking about AI for both KM and process. So I grabbed a couple of snapshots from their presentation. Hopefully you can see this. If not, you can see it better when we send it out. But they talked about how you can leverage AI for both KM and process. And I really like this, just spelling this out and then some of their key takeaways. But in general, for KM, right, helping you with your decision points along the way by putting information and knowledge in the flow of your work, right, helps you make better decisions at the right time throughout your processes, making sure that you've got the resources you need, helping you go from unstructured to structured data and information, thus leading to better knowledge, right, flow throughout the organization. And I liked this last one, makes experts faster. We always talk about finding experts, but this is actually in reference to making experts faster as well. So having more information and knowledge available to people at their fingertips when they need it can actually build your expertise at a more exponential rate. So I love that. With process improvement, they talked about the improvement for KPIs. They talked about the ability to find I'll say paper or manual processes and then be able to turn those into a more automated approach. It can help you improve those cross-functional activities simply by making things more available, bringing together connections you might not have otherwise seen, and to identify those unknown patterns. This is great. They talk about data as a proxy for the process, looking for those patterns that we might not see with the human eye. So these are just some examples of how AI can be leveraging both KM and process. And then there's some key takeaways in here that I really liked. Things like making sure that you're organized, you know why you're doing this. Don't reinvent the wheel. Focus on today's objectives and today's problems. It's not doing AI for AI's sake. Make sure you understand the risk. You're leveraging your current business processes. And I loved this, building a backlog, right? Everything's not going to go perfect. So when you have multiple use cases to go after, you're going to try, experiment, fail, try, experiment, fail, right? So make sure you have a good backlog of how you're going to use your solution so that you can keep moving through and be efficient with the adoption of, or the implementation of this. And then finally about the adoption, there's no value without adoption. This couldn't be further this couldn't be more true, right, than talking about adoption. And you have to plan and manage that as well. And you'll see this is why our last theme that we'll talk about here in just a minute is around managing change behavior, helping people through the process of constant change. So just to wrap up, this is a slide Maddie and I talked about, this whole kind of concept of preparing for artificial intelligence. This is a good wrap up of everything that we've just talked about a little bit, but it's just stay focused on what the business need is, making sure you have good content management, your data and information needs to be structured, and AI can help you do that to some degree, but there's also a lot of content management best practices that we could be leveraging to help ensure that our AI approaches are working more effectively. And focus on the people, good change management, good training, educating people, helping them feel comfortable with what a world looks like leveraging AI and how that impacts their jobs. And then finally, making sure they have the skills they need to be able to operate in a world where now they might be helping to develop the solutions, leverage the solutions, help others know how to use these solutions. So again, it's just a reminder of these are the things that we want to always be thinking about as we go forward, regardless of what technical solution that you choose. And that needs to be decided for what business problem that you're solving within your organization. So we have a poll around this because it's something we're starting to become very curious about. And we've asked this question of groups of people before around what benefits are you expecting? But what we really want to know is anybody experiencing actual benefits yet? So if you have a tangible benefit that you're currently seeing within your organization based on an AI or a generative AI solution, would you please share that with us? We're really starting to get to that point now where we want to see actual current benefits. And if you have anything else that you want to say about this question, because maybe you can't answer it, throw it in the chat too, so we can keep conversation going. But again, we're getting to that point now. Generative AI has been around for 18 plus months now. We want to start hearing from people. Is it actually doing what we think it's going to do? And are you seeing the benefits that you expected? Maybe you are, but maybe they're not as quick.
One of the things we've seen around the AI and the generative AI is that again, there's a lot of energy, passion, and also fear and anxiety. But also there's a structured and compliance-oriented mindset that's required. How do we manage the risk, as Lynda mentioned before? Mm-hmm. And so in some organizations, they had to kind of say, whoa, slow down, stop, right? Because we got to think this through and do it correct, not just throw it at a problem hoping it sticks. and it doesn't
Yeah.
cause us other unintended consequences. So
Yeah.
we have seen a trend of some organizations slowing down, or even in some cases saying, stop everything. And that may be where you're at, maybe not, but definitely responsible application, thought through and connected is really where the success is going to come. And it will come. It's not going to go away. We know that.
Correct. Yeah. Let me see if we can see some results here. So we do have people starting to see some benefits. So that's amazing. Operational efficiency and productivity, right? With that automation component, that is one of the things that we always expected the most. Enhancing search capabilities, enhancing content management capabilities. That's amazing. Expertise. We got a little bit in every category, at least, which is great. So the creation of new content implies that generative AI approach is really being put in place in organizations as well. So this is fascinating. I love it. And there's somebody put in the chat as well that they're not allowed to use AI right now. So we still have some of that going on, like what Jeff said. We've got a wide variety. Most are creating their own solutions. They're not leveraging. Good question, Christina. I don't know if we can tell how many people.
That's 56, Lynda.
50. Oh yeah, you can see. Oh yeah, I see 56 right there. 4 out of 50. Yeah, it's right there in front of me. Thank you. My analytical friend, Madison there. Yes, 56 people on the call took the poll. So thank you for taking that. We appreciate it. All right, we are going to move on to our last kind of hot topic and takeaway, which was really around transformation and change. And these two pictures you see here were from two of our keynote speakers, which were fantastic, April Rennie and Tucker Bryant, who both spoke to us about change, transformation, and growth, and it was amazing. And any information we have in our conference information on our resource library, go check it out. They had some great talks. And we're going to talk a little bit. The reason I put this slide up, this is a slide that actually is something from our resource library. So it's research. But the reason I put this up here was because throughout the conference, a lot of the conversations that took place around change, or a lot of the sessions that took place, covered some or all of these components of change, right? We talk about the structure and the resources it takes to manage change. If you have central teams or change management professionals in your organization, we talked a lot, as somebody mentioned in the chat, the role of leadership, building buy-in with leadership, leveraging them for sponsorship and advocacy and messaging, all of that. So critical. Communications, right? The approaches that we use. How do we leverage our communities for communications? How do we leverage our online forums? How are we communicating change, and is it resonating to build actual true buy-in for the changes? Training, what training is needed, and is it effective? Engagement, that's that emotional connection that we all feel. We had several presentations that dealt with the soft skills, or the people side, and how people are feeling in their organizations as it relates to the different kinds of changes happening around process, KM, and in a lot of cases, AI. That's where the discussions went. And finally, rewards and recognition. It's always, how do you get people to do this? How are you incentivizing them? Can you give us examples? And a lot of our presenters do share the kinds of reward structures they have in place. Maybe they have a technical expertise program like fellows, or they have awards for the top technical or innovative talent in their organization, or maybe it's on your performance review, right? So lots of different ways you can look at the reward structure. Now, an example from the conference, this is some information from one of our keynote speakers, April Rennie, and this is not a slide that she used. This is just information that I pulled from her website around her book that she talked about, which was called Flux, the 8 Superpowers for Thriving in Constant Change. So highly recommend it. It gives you a great perspective to think about. And she calls this developing a flux mindset, which basically translates to having a change mindset, that openness to do something different, to, as you can see from her direction here, slow down, right? Slow down a little bit, manage the pace that fits for you and those around you. I like the get lost, get comfortable with the discomfort and harness not knowing. It's okay sometimes to not know everything, right? But it does take trust in relationships to feel comfortable with that. I like the be all the more human as well. Recalibrate your relationship to technology and favor it as a human connection, right? Don't be afraid. Think about it as how you're going to interact with technology as a human, and what does that take, and what does that look like? And, you know you're enough. Discover the foundation of your true happiness and well-being too, right? Sometimes that's that emotional connection that you can or can't feel toward a change, and just know who you are. So lots of great conversations wrapped around the concept of change, but I thought April did a great job of bringing it really all together for us, and highly recommend maybe you take a look at some of her work, or she's probably got some presentations and videos and stuff posted on her website, but really enjoyed that. Maddie, is there anything you wanted to say? I know we all really liked this presentation, but.
Yeah, I would say I liked the fact the best that she touched on the human factors that relate to change. And so many times I think in change management, or just businesses in general, sometimes we'll dehumanize a process. However, you really need to stop and remember that the process involves a human.
Yep.
And touching on that get lost or story, I went on a trip where we didn't know what we were going to do the next day until the night before. And as a type A person, that was really hard for me. But it was so crazy how much less I had to worry about what we were doing next, because it wasn't my responsibility. I just had to go from one thing to the next. And at dinner time, I would know what we were doing the next day. And it was just very freeing and relaxing. So every once in a while, I definitely encourage the get lost.
I like that. The personal, try it personally first, right? And then
Yeah.
maybe you get more comfortable with it in the workplace, right? That's great. And April also talked about this thing called the power of your pause, like when you pause. And she talked about creating a not to-do list, which again, for a type A person could be really good, right? You like to have to-do lists. What are the things you're not going to do? Because they're either not important right now, you don't have time, or you don't need to challenge yourself quite that much. So put the things that you're not going to do on a list as well, and put them to the side. And also the concept of taking a technology Sabbath. So taking a day off of technology to really put your focus on humans, and then just breathe, right? So I think it's a great just look at helping us really humanize all the things that are happening. And it makes me think about the quote, somebody just put this in the chat, and now I'm not going to be able to find it. They said, somebody find it for me. Here we go. Oh yeah, quote from the conference that someone heard: "We'll never be moving as slowly as we are today." Right? Because of the pace of change. So what a great thing to really think about. We'll never be moving as slowly as we are today. So if you think it's fast today, just wait. So we have to develop these capabilities to be able to adjust, and we have to help those in our organizations to adjust, because we're driving a lot of change, right? Through KM and process work. So, okay. Moving on, one example from one of our breakouts speakers, and then we're close to closing this webinar out today, but I liked this as an example. This is from one of our companies, Ogletree Deacons. They're a large labor and employment law firm, and they take a KM product engagement strategy at their organization. It's a great example of really a true engagement strategy throughout the life cycle of their product management. And it really focuses on building relationships, collaboration, getting people outside their comfort zone. So I thought this was a great example from one of our breakouts. And they developed a more formal change management approach, a phased approach. So thinking about it from kind of an agile perspective, but also applying it across the life cycle of all of their product management. They said, start small, right? Get the elephant out in the room early, start small, and take an approach that's in phases. Start with that alpha version. What's that proof of concept? So that's the smaller scale, lesser amount of people involved. Then move to your beta level. Get those focus groups, get demos going, have some one-on-one conversations, get surveys out there, start collecting that feedback. And then when you launch, make sure that you've got personalized communications and KPIs and engagement metrics and strategies in place. And make sure you have that post-launch approach as well, the reporting. You've got incentives for people who are referring and really embracing the change early on, feedback, testimonials. So I thought this was a great example from one of our member organizations that said, hey, we're really taking a phased approach to change because it's going to be continuous. And we got to move through this in a way that's going to feel a lot more comfortable. So with that, I think we're going to get to the end, and we're going to let Jeff close us out a little bit with talking about phenomenons again.
Yeah, we thought, just to wrap it all up, the concept of the phenomenon. Again, think about the word itself, right? Something that really is unusual. It's not every day. It makes us view or think about and engage in ways that we wouldn't normally do. And that's really powerful there. So the example on the screen here of the total solar eclipse, and it connected people in so many different ways that are just unusual. So if we move that into the knowing doing phenomenon and how we connect knowledge management and process management, the question is, how can we now take advantage of this insight that we can work together, and working together, we can do more for our organizations and each other. And that's really an opportunity that we want to say, how are you going to now recognize that and do something? So coming out of this call today, or the conference 2 weeks ago, hopefully you can now kind of just take that energy and that insight to say, I'm not in this alone. I don't just have my toolkit. So that's one real thing that we can take advantage of. But even more importantly, you now want to do this for those in your organization. So how can you create the phenomenon to help them open their thinking and connect in ways that they wouldn't before? Because without them, we can't do it. We're helping the organization improve to drive their outcomes in future state. And if we can now create the phenomenon that brings them together and makes them get on that change and grow curve faster and with more power, then we're providing a tremendous service to the value and delivery that we're trying to get to. So that's really it. Figure out how you can leverage it, and how can you create that experience for those around you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jeff. And if you have any ideas that you want to share, throw them in the chat. But I'm going to close this out for today and say thank you, first of all, for everybody attending. This was amazing. It was great to see some of the people who attended the conference throw in some of their comments and insights, and some of them were presenters. So thank you again for your contributions and for being here today. It was lovely to have those of you who couldn't make it to the conference because you cared enough to come and find out what are we talking about, and you want to stay involved. So I think that's amazing. And we're getting an answer to the question that's in the Q&A right now about Ogletree. We actually have a case study on Ogletree, so we'll make sure that we share that with you. That'll help you answer. Somebody asked a question around their methods around their surveys, and we have like I said, we have a good case study on Ogletree Deacons, so happy to share that with you. Just as a reminder, you'll get a copy of the slides, as I mentioned. Please fill out the survey on this webinar. We'd love to hear from you and find out how well it went, and if you have ideas for how we can make it better, or if you have a story that you want to share, please go ahead and click on that link. And then finally, Maddie and I like to share with you the upcoming engagements that we have going on for KM and PPM. We have webinars coming up. For me and KM, heavily focused on technology. Also for Maddie, I think she's focusing on technology as well in June. So we both did surveys earlier this year. So we have a lot of new information around processing KM and how we're leveraging emerging technologies for that. Again, we will be focusing on the human side of that equation as well. Also, Maddie has a roundtable coming up on the use of process frameworks. So please join her for that. We also have there's a survey out right now that Maddie has going on around process programs. And then we will have a survey actually on change management coming up for knowledge management in about 3 to 4 weeks time. So be on the lookout for that. We always have engagements happening. Check out the roundtables, check out the webinars, participate in the survey, and most importantly, connect with each other. Right? The people that you met today on the call, make sure you're reaching out to each other. You learn a lot from each other. But then when you have great learnings, make sure you share them back with us too, right? Because we like to know what's going on and how you're learning from each other. So with that being said, I will, resources. One last thing, we always try to provide you with resources that you can go access in our resource library. We included both KM and process related information for the sake of this webinar being joint. And with that, anybody, Jeff or Maddie, do you have any final last words?
Just excited that we've got the audience working together, and there'll be more opportunities ahead. Please reach out with any additional questions. We're happy to get involved and hopefully connect you to more content or give you some answers if we can help.
Absolutely. Yeah, awesome. All right. Thank you, everyone. It is 1:29 according to my clock. So we made it just on time today. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we hope to see you again in another APQC event soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.